Not much, actually. Yeah.
All right, who do we have on the telephone lines?
Hi, Ryan Jacobs.
Welcome, thank you. Anyone else on the phone line?
Hit something and he said that it gave him a real shock. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the April 11, 2018 public session meeting of the Canada District School Board, and I'll ask us to stand for the singing of O Canada. Before I ask the director to do roll call, I think it's very important at this time that we acknowledge and express our condolences that involved an accident that happened in Saskatchewan last Friday, involving the loss of some young lives and some not so young lives. I can't possibly understand what they must be going through. I do know that it has impacted many lives, it's impacted many families, it's impacted many communities. And in fact, it's touched Canada, it's reached into the United States. It was a terrible, terrible accident, and the impacts will be lasting forever. Before I ask us to take a moment to show our respects, I want to read the names. And just found out just a few moments ago that it wasn't 15, the 16th person has died. Adam Harold was 16 years old. Connor Lucan, 21. Evan Thomas, 18. Jason Leach, 19. Jackson Joseph, 20 years old. Logan Boulay, 21. Logan Hunter, 18. Logan Schatz, 20. Stephen Wack, 21 years old. Parker Tobin, 18. Brody Hines, 18. Darcy Hagen, 42 years old. Glenn Dorkinson, 59. Tyler Bieber, 29. And Dana Bronze, 25. Those are the people that lost their lives. There were so many others who were injured and faced a very tough battle to be able to recover what they had prior to the accident. On all of us in the Upper Canada District School Board, our trustees, the staff, our students, our families, we all want to express our deepest sympathies to the family and friends of those who lost their lives. And I'd ask us if we could just stand for a moment of silence just to reflect on that. Thank you very much. Again, before I ask the director to do roll call, I'd like to thank Hillary for filling in for Lisa tonight. I know Lisa's a little under the weather. But thank you so much for doing that for us. We look forward to having you with us. Director, can I get you to do a roll call, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is our roll call for 11th of April, 2018. Trustee Armour. First Vice Chair Karkner.
Present.
Trustee Cram. Present. Trustee Jacobs.
Present.
Trustee Wendy McPherson.
Present.
Trustee Bill McPherson. Trustee McAllister.
Present.
Second Vice Chair McDonald.
Present.
Chair McMillan.
Present.
Trustee Richards.
Present.
Trustee Swan. Student Trustee Marshall Wilson.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have quorum.
Thank you very much, Director. I need a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board approve consent agenda item 3.02 to 3.03, April 11th, 2018, as submitted. Moved by Trustee McDonald, seconded by Trustee Cram. Thank you very much. Please cast your votes, please.
I'm in favor.
Yeah, I'm in favor as well. It could be I'm in the wrong meeting. I'm in the right meeting. But is it coming up in any? It's not coming up on the screens. Can we just have a show of hands, please? Thank you very much. Ryan, in favor?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, do we have any conflict of interest declarations? Seeing there are none, we're going to move forward into our first delegation, or first presentation, which is Queen Elizabeth Public School. And I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Jody Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to invite Principal Mark Williams to the table this evening. So the Queen Elizabeth Public School is located in the town of Perth, Ontario. And as Principal Williams will share with you this evening, it's a very collaborative community with a very strong academic success record. And I believe our board team has had the opportunity in our previous school year to visit that school. And so we look forward to the presentation this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about our school. Queen Elizabeth Public School is a single-track French immersion school in Perth. Our school is referred to as QES affectionately, dating back to its original name, the Queen Elizabeth School. I'll just flip to the next slide here. These are some of the school profile statistics that, for the first slide. I inputted some demographics there to indicate the primary focus of our school. We have almost 60% of our children are under the age of 9, which creates an interesting dynamic for our school. The QES staff collaborate as a very highly effective team and are quite innovative in finding opportunities to access community resources. The fact that we are centrally located in town, often walking to many venues, has given us the opportunity to develop many prosperous relationships with those venues. We have found that in our purposeful use of town resources that it has helped contribute to community development as well as youth engagement in Perth, thus has embedded our students in their community for experiential learning. Just flip to the next slide, and we have a list of many of the organizations we work with quite closely. The next slide is our EQAO scores, and I'll highlight a couple of items for this slide. In our SIPSA teams, we've spent time reviewing EQO questions and deconstructing student responses to various types of questions. Moreover, teachers have collaborated to unpack the student data, and this has been quite integral to our success. It has helped us ascertain the gaps in learning and strategies for moving forward. In grade 3, you'll notice we've had 4 years in a row at or above provincial standard in reading, writing, and math. In grade 6, we've experienced 3 years in a row above provincial standard in reading and writing, and math has experienced an increase between 12 to 14% since 2013-2014. Our success in math can be attributed to a dedicated teaching team keen on collaboration. We've been experimenting with many comprehensive math strategies, such as math read-alouds, math contests, math word walls that explore terminology with students and help develop those grassroots needed elements of conceptually understanding how the math works. We've also been peer marking student work and analyzing responses for trends. And that's a collaborative effort to do that. Our success in literacy can be attributed to work that has experimented with co-construction of teaching teams and a dedicated focus on non-fiction reading and writing. We've been developing writing prompts to support evidence-based writing and ultimately the proper conventions to assist with communication of those ideas. Our intention has been twofold: to develop inferential thinking during the reading and in turn command of the conventions during that nonfiction writing when responding to that prompt. And that's happening at the primary level too, so we're trying to start some of those early methods in the primary division. Just moving to the next slide. So our literacy SIPSA, I'll outline some of the key points that are noted above. Our literacy team has focused on ways to better support students with writing conventions. We've specifically been working with junior grades and evidence-based writing assignments for our SIPSA goal. With our success in the thinking and inquiry questions, we decided to drill down to writing conventions to support communication of those skills. As a team, we reviewed the EQAO data from last year and determined a specific emphasis. We determined that utilizing writing conventions as a focus, we could learn more about the criteria for writing conventions and the importance it has for communication and presenting evidence in student writing. We used the EQAO rubrics to determine scoring criteria and established a baseline for student writing. We also learned that conventions improved once we coupled writing with concrete strategies, such as transition words, to help support the embedding of that evidence. In other words, putting objective fact into their own words. Anecdotally, from my opinion, teacher efficacy is growing year over year at QES with continued involvement in the SIPSA process. We continually discover new ways to query the data and build on our successes of past learning in our SIPSA journey. I'll just move to the math SIPSA. Just moving to the math SIPSA slide. And so we've had quite an advantageous position with the fact that our math team, our math question has worked well with the RMS days, and it helps support our teachers with strategies and collaborative opportunities to work with colleagues at the all-staff sessions. So we've harnessed the learning from these shared experiences and incorporated many of those ideas into our classroom to suit our own school goal. Our intention with our math goal was to use more multi-step algebraic questions that would benefit students solving for the unknown. We were optimistic that with well-designed scaffolded lessons, we would be able to provide students with skills to solve more complicated math problems that are connected to the thinking and inquiry style EQAO questions, which is one of our deficits at QES. In addition, we used open-ended questions to encourage multiple pathways and different ways to represent solutions, so an entry point into the question. We learned that after assessing the algebraic level of the students with an open-ended multi-step question, which is a complicated style question, there were a variety of responses that were unsuccessful. For some, strategies used were very efficient, but others struggled to find that entry point. We decided that we needed to break the equation into parts and develop further conceptual understanding of balancing an equation and the important understanding of early algebraic understanding. And I inputted a small example there of how we started with one point of equilibrium and moved to solving for the unknown. And we were experimenting with that at the primary level too. Just moving to the wellness slide. So just commenting on the wellness slide, we have an active Meet a We club, and they do a great job of including everyone in the school to be selected for a star of the day. Their star is worn as a badge with a description that is read on the announcements about their achievements and contributions to the school. We also have students use persuasive writing with messages to me about how we can improve our school. Recently, primary students wrote letters to the principal with reasons why they should be included in junior school dances, to which I agreed. Kindergarten students also self-advocated to support a local bird sanctuary based on their assessment of importance of a rehabilitation to ecosystem from a visit they had from a local bird group in Ottawa. And they raised $500 with their own personal initiative. And there's a young lady putting a poster up there on the wall. As part of our SIPSA wellness goal, we've been surveying our grade 6 students on how they feel about moving to grade 7. And the results have shown us that students are nervous about the transition, surprisingly so, and would benefit from continued visits to their new school and even an introduction of the teacher for the following year. Just moving on to one thing we can share that's quite special about Queen Elizabeth. So the one special thing I'd like to highlight is our love of performing as a school. We have amazingly talented singers and performers, and as a whole school, we always have a fantastic concert experience. This includes French plays that are put on ad hoc, seasonal concerts that are in the gym that are overflowing, special interest concerts as well. And the photo above is from our Canada 150 celebration last year, where the students performed tremendously for our Lieutenant Governor General, Elizabeth Dowswell. As a final note, our community is very proud of their school and its accomplishments. They are also very proud of staff commitment to learning, and so am I. And I'd like to thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much. Your trustee is Trustee Bill McPherson. I'm just going to read what he's not here tonight. He wasn't able to join us, but I just want to read what he said in an email to me, and I'm sure he wants me to read this. He says, Queen Elizabeth School has a long and celebrated history in Perth and Lanark County. It is the oldest elementary school within Ward 2 and pioneered the EFI program when it was introduced. During my visits, I found the school council members engaged and enthusiastic about what is happening in their school. Thanks in no small part going to Principal Mark Williams for his dedication and hard work at Queen Elizabeth. Once again, my apologies for not being able to attend. He's very proud of the school, and again, he wishes he could be here.
Thank you.
I'll open it up to comments or questions. Trustee Cartner.
Thank you, Chair. Just one comment. I had the fortunate chance to attend your 150th celebration, and it was interesting because Elizabeth and I ended up dressing very much alike. And I remember there was a student that came up to us, and I can't remember what she called me, but it was close to being the Queen. So I thought, do you remember, Stephen?
I remember.
But anyway, it was a great experience, and your school was just decked out for the event, and the students were all totally engrossed in the activity. So I understand that everyone is proud of the school. I know why. Thank you.
And I know you were disappointed we wouldn't call you Your Majesty. Right?
Yeah, I know. I was totally taken back.
Yeah, right. I'm sure you are. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much for the presentation. Safe travels home.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is the Board Improvement Plan for Student Achievement. I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Jody Barrett, who's going to introduce. And we're going to make some room at the back, I believe. Okay, so we're going to introduce Shelley Corleone, Anne-Marie Volbeck, and Leslie McClure. I'll get you to bring them up and introduce them to us.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You did provide that opportunity for all those names, so thank you for that, but I'll repeat them here. So we have our excellent team, Teaching and Learning Principal Anne-Marie Bolbeck, Teaching and Learning Principal Shelley Corleone, and Leslie McKellar, our Vice Principal, who work very closely as a team in supporting the work for our Board Improvement Plan. They are one component of a large team that we rely upon to do the heavy lifting within our system. And we're really excited to share with you this evening the work that has been taking place in our district with regards to our Board Improvement Plan for student achievement. The Board Improvement Plan is reflective of a process that's intentional and collaborative, and it's really built upon a precise approach that we take as a system for supporting our student achievement and well-being. In our mandate of preparing our students for a successful life, we are utilizing an instructional learning cycle which is focusing on literacy and numeracy in planning for our student learning needs. So we're going to share our learning together to this point in the school year, and I will turn it over first to Anne-Marie.
Thank you. So I'm going to guide you through some of our work in literacy in Upper Canada. And first, to start off, we'll look at our board's goal, which essentially states that we're looking at increasing our student achievement in terms of the success on our EQAO scores by 3% for grade 3, grade 6, and grade 10. And of course, this is modeled after the belief that if we establish consistent and intentional strategies from kindergarten to grade 12 with common assessment for learning practices, then student achievement in reading and writing will improve. I do want to point out that when we talk about literacy in Upper Canada, we are including English language literacy, French language literacy, as well as programming for our English language learners. So this first set of bar graphs looks at some trends, 5-year trends in reading and writing for our primary students, our grade 3 EQAO scores, and we can see that we have been fairly consistent in grade 3 reading over the last 5 years, a little slight decrease in our grade 3 writing, and we are falling a little bit short of our provincial scores across the board. Similarly, in our next slide is with reference to our grade 6 data, our 5-year trends, and we are trending upward with our grade 6 reading and writing, again falling a little bit short of our provincial scores here. We know that our elementary schools determine the goals of their SIPSAs, their cycles of inquiry, based on their specific data in their schools. And these are some of the things that our schools have been focusing on over the last year. And although there's a variety of different elements that schools are focusing on, we do know that all of these elements are important to balanced literacy programming in our schools. When we look at our OSSLT results, and these are the results for all of our participating students, we can see that our board scores over the last 5 years have been very consistent, as have the province. And again, we're falling about 7 percentage points short of the provincial results. But where we really see some discrepancy is when we pick apart our OSSLT scores into academic programming and applied programming. And we see that our students who are in academic programming are successful at a rate of 91% versus 41% of our applied students in applied programming. So, of course, that's a concern. Although it's very, very close to our provincial scores, it is, of course, a concern for us. Here we see some cohort data, which tells a good news story. We see that there are increases from grade 3 to grade 6 to the OSSLT. But once again, once we dissect that OSSLT data, we see that there is a discrepancy between academic programming and applied programming. And in fact, when we look at student success rates in applied programs, we have fallen over the last 3 years from 49% to 41% success rate. This is a provincial trend, and one of the things that the province is doing to address this is some funding for gap closing in literacy. And in Upper Canada, what we have done is we have focused that with some training and some resources for our secondary schools, such as the benchmark assessment kits, so that they can establish what current reading levels are of students in secondary and begin addressing those specific needs, and looking at some tier 2 interventions with our leveled literacy intervention, as well as some training and resources in other areas as well. Again, we have a variety of things that secondary schools are focusing on with their SIPSAs, all of which are essential components of good literacy practices in our schools. And those items are identified through specific school data. So just as a wrap-up, some of the system support that we are providing for literacy across Upper Canada, all of our schools have literacy learning teams that meet monthly. We have our gap closing in literacy for all of our secondary schools that are involved. We do NTIP training for our new teachers. We do a full day on literacy strategies for new teachers. We're looking at good assessment practices across subject areas and looking at early reading with Empower and our summer learning program. So a number of things that we are focusing on for literacy in our system.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. So we're going to move on now to mathematics. I'll give you just one moment to read our goal in numeracy. There's two things I want to draw your attention to. First, the word every. So we're focusing on all of our students moving up by one level, which is a shift in thinking of a focus on our level 2 learner. And the addition to the report card and lagging EQAO data to that short cycle of pre and post. Where are students today? What intentional move did I try? Where are they tomorrow? And how are we closing the gaps for our learners? So over on the left are the actual initiatives that we have this year, but I want to draw your attention to the graph on the right. In EQAO, you'll notice that grade 3, 6, 9, and grade 9 academic and applied, our students do well at those basic knowledge and understanding questions. Give them the numbers, give them a word problem, they can add them, multiply them, divide them. But when we ask them to apply to real life contexts and to think, those thinking questions, you can see that we are not doing well as a system. So we targeted our interventions to get our students to be thinkers in the math classroom. And so one way we did that is through the structures of the problem. So instead of simply saying, I have 7 Pokemon cards, I add 6 more at my birthday, how many do I have now? We're shifting it to, I have 13 Pokemon cards, so does my friend. She has 6 in her hand, but some in her pocket. How many are in her pocket? Suddenly, kids have to think about the problem and try and make meaning of the problem. That's a simple primary example, but we're doing that K through 12. We actually have 31 schools who are now focusing on the structure of the problem. You'll see throughout the presentation that I'm infusing evidence from the SIPSAs to support the gains that we're seeing. So if you look at this slide in terms of the join type problems, where the change is unknown, our students, well, you can't see the data. I don't know why the slideshow's chopped off, but they've moved from 61 to 83%. So a 22% gain. Same thing with change unknown for the separate type problems. There are some huge gains in that one school, and that's representative of many of our schools. What we began to wonder is, do we have a disconnect between report card marks and EQAO data? And if you look at this one school sampling, you'll notice that almost no students are at level 1 or 2 in grade 3 and in grade 6. But when you look at their EQAO data, over half of the grade 6 students are not at provincial standard. So that gave us a problem of practice, and is there something we need to focus on to really begin to understand what is a level 3, what is a level 4, what constitute level 1? Are we getting our students to think and problem solve? So we set upon an assessment in mathematics journey with 26 of our schools, in which we focused on that assessment loop, and we talked about what is level 3. We talked about using learning goals and success criteria so that the students could see in their work what I needed to do, and then we could provide the students through an asset lens with some descriptive feedback. And this is what one principal had to say about the work she's doing in her learning teams. I'll let you read it. So they started with some data, and in the learning team they realized we didn't really understand that continuum of mathematics. And because we didn't have consistency, the data didn't really mean anything. Such huge growth to recognize 3 important things. Student work needs to be at the table when we're talking about student achievement. We have to have a common understanding of what achievement looks like. We have to know the mathematics, and more importantly, we have to understand what instructional moves, what can the teacher do to close those gaps. And that's been the focus of the work this year in our RMS strategy and our numeracy plan. We know, however, the junior results have been decreasing from primary. But if we wait until junior to focus our attention, that's 5 missed years of opportunity to get our students to be thinkers and meaning makers. So we ventured into an EOSDN kindergarten inquiry with 7 schools, and we had intense, increased, and regular schools. We wanted to leverage what was going on in those regular schools to help the intense needs schools to work on, for example, collaboration, a number one theme that emerges. And then we had a PD day where all of our kindergarten teachers and DECs were invited for a full day of math learning so that we could spread that EOSDN-wide, system-wide. This is a sampling of the 7 schools. It's their data for their 3 focus students on the counting principles. And you will see that the top row is what students, their asset model, what they could do. But if you look on the right-hand side on the bottom, there were quite a few students who yet can't do some of those skills, such as knowing what quantity means. And so we're doing our post-assessment in May with that group, and we're really anxious to see the gains. We're very confident we'll see gains, because if you notice this slide, the continuum of learning is clearly outlined. We're using the What to Look For book. It's an amazing book that teaches us here are the strategies students need along a continuum to become more efficient at adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and counting. Here's one school's evidence. It's an intense needs school. Their pre-assessment, the first 2 bars highlighted in red, their strategies for multiplying were counting all. 1, 2, 3, and repeated addition. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3, grade 7 and 8. Look at their post-assessment. They're now using the algorithm, and they're using partial products, which is a very efficient strategy for multiplying. Concrete evidence of the impact we're having through the work we're doing. Here's another school. Their continuum goes down instead of across. In their pre's, notice all of the numbers are at the top, and in the post, the numbers are moving to the bottom. And in terms of accuracy, look in the grade 4, 5, 6 world, from 7% accuracy to 80%, 48 to 83, and 65 to 81. Not only are they now using the algorithm, they know why they're using it, and they can do it accurately because they have that understanding of what multiplication means. We know, however, we can't have improved achievement if we don't have wellness. We have to focus on the whole child and know our learner. So I'll share a few initiatives we have. We're doing an Inuit mathematics inquiry. As a matter of fact, yesterday and today, our Knowledge Keeper were in Arkland and Beckwith, and there are 3 other schools they'll be attending in the next few days. But we spent 7 months building relationships with our Inuit families. We had 2 feasts at the Ottawa Inuit Children's Center, because we know we need that family home connection, and we need to get to know not only our students but our families. And now we're ready to embark in the mathematics, and we're going to be doing some data management and with some Arctic games, some patterning with Inukshuk's, and some reasoning with igloo building. So the math is secondary. It's about learning about the culture and the families. Also on our RMS Day 2, we focused and targeted our well-being around students with special education needs. Our students with the LD profile, their intelligence is at or above average level, but they are not performing that way. So we spent an entire day talking about what are some cognitive domains we need to dig into? What's executive functioning? And more specifically, what can I do as a mathematics teacher strategically for a student with executive functioning issues? And we did it for all of the domains. We created student profiles, and our teachers walked away knowing what we can do in our math classroom to support our students with special education needs. And on day 4, we focused on well-being. Every single learning experience we had the teachers go to the center of the vision of the math learner and talk about what's the impact on social, emotional, physical, and cognitive well-being of the child, because we know we need to know the human as well as the math learner. None of this can happen without our human resources, and two huge groups are A, our learning partners, and B, our administrators to supporting the teachers in the classroom, which translates into supporting the students in the classroom. You see a picture there of one of our learning partners. She's actually leading the lesson in the classroom. They plan with the teacher, they co-facilitate together in the classroom. Sometimes the learning partner models, and that's where the shifts in teaching practice happen, in the classroom at the student desk. We could not do this without our learning partners. And as we know, I'll just show you one quick slide here of the focus on the learning partner working collaboratively and talking about success criteria. You can't see the slide, but it says from 3 to 4, 1 to 2, and 4 to 4. There are gains happening with our focus students, and we know if they're happening with our focus students, they're happening with everyone. Almost done. We need the lead learner at the table. We knew from day one, the work of Vivian Robinson, there's double the impact if the principal's at the table, co-learning alongside the teachers. So we knew that with our SIPSAs, there was clear goals being set. We had if-then statements. We were doing a lot of work, but we weren't having any impact. So we knew we needed some data to do that. So we did a traveling roadshow, and we talked about how you can collect pre and post data in the moment. And we, in one of our LLMAs, actually two of them, we co-constructed success criteria. What does a good SIPSA look like? We actually put them on the table. We had success criteria. We assessed them against the criteria, and then they took that work back to their learning teams. And it's really starting to show a huge gain. In year one, 3 schools used pre and post data. This year, right now, as of last week, we have 51 schools using that cycle of pre and post data, that evidence in the every month, every week in the classroom. That's a 16-fold gain in terms of students and teachers and administrators together looking at what can the students do today, what am I going to do instructionally, and did it impact my students' learning? So that's very impactful. We just received a report from the ministry. We have to report for our grade 9 applied students, which we know is a target group for sure. And at the beginning of the semester, last semester, we predicted that 44 or almost 45% of our students would be at level 3 or 4. The ministry average was 43.4. We ended up with 54% of our students at level 3 or 4, and the average for the ministry for across Ontario was 49%. So we had a 20% gain. The average across Ontario was 13% gain. So we're starting to see the shifts not only in practice in the classroom, but achievement with our students. Finally, the last thing I want to say, you notice on the right here, is that we're tracking every single time our teachers come together, no matter what it is in mathematics. We ask them not only to bring what they're doing in their classrooms based on the work we're doing in our RMS days or assessment, but what's the impact on student learning? We've shifted the focus of I did this, I did this, I did this, to my students are doing this, my students are doing this. And so our learning partners track for every single participant what their responses are, and then we code them and we summarize where the impacts are, and that's just a sampling of that. In order to have systemic change, we need to spread so that all of our teachers are doing the work in their classrooms. We need to go deep in terms of the thinking and the learning and the pedagogy. We need to look at student work, and we need that internal ownership. And that can only happen with collaboration. And that's what we're really starting to see in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to comments or questions. Trustee Carton, do you have a comment or a question? Or Trustee McDonald? You first? Okay.
Whatever, sure. Are you prepared, so the other attachment that you had in the report, do you have that in front of you tonight?
Is that the report, that the report part?
Do you have
Through
it?
you, Chair. I have that in front of me,
Okay.
yes.
So I won't get there yet, but I want to ask a question about that, and we'll see if we can answer it.
Certainly.
Because we didn't talk about it tonight, but I still want to ask some questions around that. So in your presentation, you talked about the 13 and the 20%, I think it is. So is that 13% based on EQA results, and the 20% is based on our initial assessment?
It's credit where it's the AEAC tool is a reporting tool with the ministry that tracks what level students are in their grade 9 applied mathematic courses. So the EQAO data won't be released until next September. And so this is how many students in the class were at level 3 or 4 through U-Chair, sorry.
But that's for us, but is that also for the province?
That's in comparison to, so every single school board has to report across the province, so we're doing a comparison between what they're reporting and what we're reporting.
Okay. The other question I had before I get into the other report, was around, sorry, a lot of scanning here.
That's okay, David.
You talked about the comparison of report card data
Mm-hmm.
and EQO data.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we've talked about this in the past, and we've
Mm-hmm.
tried to correlate it. So, if we've got the grade 3 is 73%. No, sorry, report card data
Through you,
is
Chair,
on the right
it's
side, and EQO
yes.
is on the left.
Right.
So, what it's showing though is your 3-4 levels are much higher
Mm-hmm.
than EQAO.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't think you were saying that we need to assess how we assess kids, but I think it's an important comment to be made that how do we extract the data? How do we show our communities? How do we show parents that the one time, well, it's not one time, it's a number of days, is a simple measurement, but there's longitudinal measurements that we have, and the report card information is a valid piece for us to work with. So how do we bring more of that out?
So through you, Chair, I think the way that we bring that out is that we more closely align our report card data with the EQAO data, so that when our teachers begin to have a solid understanding of what does level 4 achievement look like and what are those qualifiers in terms of appropriateness of the choice of tool or the representation that's being used, the connections being made between the different representations, and all of that to show level 3 and level 4 thinking, then on our report cards, the number of students who are achieving 3 and 4 will be better aligned with the results in EQAO. And then what then happens is when the teacher has that solid understanding of what that looks like, they then can then adapt changes in their classroom in order to get those students to be thinkers. So I'll give you that example back to the structure of the problem. We had a grade 1 teacher who is now starting to change the structure of the problem, and one of her level 3-4 students consistently at level 3 or 4 said, "You can't answer that question," because the two numbers weren't there to be added to get an answer. There was an answer in the question, and they need to figure out what was missing. And, you know, she's young, 5 or 6. Tools came out, and then she realized, oh, you can answer this question. But she didn't understand what the question was asking her. And that's what we want our students to do, is actually make meaning of the problem and be thinkers and be problem solvers. And they do that through collaboration and discussion in the classroom and using tools at the site of the learning. And the more that we give those opportunities to our students, then they will actually be demonstrating that level 3-4 thinking, and then we'll be better aligned in positions to perform better on our EQAO tests. I'm not sure if that answers your question, or if you have a follow-up.
Yeah, I have, so a follow-up. We teach the curriculum.
Correct.
EQAO is based on the curriculum?
Correct.
So
Well,
we're not-
through you, Chair, yes.
We're not talking apples and oranges.
Correct.
How difficult was it for you to extract, maybe not you personally, but the team to extract this data?
Well, through you, Chair, Leslie and I sat down, we went into Scopus, and we went to every single school's Scopus data, and then we went down to the different subject area. We just showed you the math and the English, or the math for this presentation, but for every single subject area, we extracted that information. We took a screenshot, and actually our PD day that's coming up on April 27th, we're focusing on assessment, and one portion of that is each principal administrator now has their EQAO and report card data, and they're going to be analyzing that data to see if there's a problem of practice in terms of alignment between the two. So it's very time-consuming work, but we are workhorses, and we thought it was important to actually provide that data to the schools so that they didn't have to go looking for it, put it in front of them, and then we created some guiding questions around that to ask them, where are the categories of the achievement chart, what does level 3 mean, and so those are the conversations that will be happening in the schools.
Thank you.
I have other questions, but
Yeah,
I'll
we'll come back to it. Trustee Cartner?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My first question is for Principal Bolbeck. Going back to your slide where you showed the cohort data for Upper Canada District School Board for grade 3, 6, and OSSLT. I don't know if I can get the number up here, but it is slide number, oops, it doesn't tell me.
Oh, back one.
Yes.
That one. Yep. You said that you start intervention for the students who are in the applied division. When do you start that intervention with these students?
Through you, Chair. The goal is we understand, research tells us that our biggest bang for our buck is doing that intervention in the early years. Right, that's where we're going to close those gaps. The sooner we do that, the better it is. So in terms of what we're doing system-wide, our summer learning program focusing on primary students, our Empower Reading focusing on primary, junior, intermediate students, we see those gaps happening at grade 10 when the students write the Ontario Secondary School Literacy Test, but we recognize that we need to have those good strategies in place early on to try and decrease those gaps.
Follow up?
Certainly.
So you're working on getting it into the lower grades now, right? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes. Yes, through you, Chair. And the Gap Closing and Literacy project that is funded by the Ministry of Education is targeted for grades 7 to 10. So that is, for that particular project, that has been our focus, is ensuring that the 7 to 10 teachers have some skills and resources to support them with their students.
The reason I ask that question is that I know our secondary schools, a lot of them are 7 to 12, so you've got those students a little earlier to work with to reach a higher level by the time they get to grade 10. So I'm glad to see that it's working that way.
Yes, thank you.
And I have another question, but if there's someone else.
Well, let's see if there are, and then we'll come back to you and Trustee McDonald. Trustee McAllister.
My question is with regard to the EQ.
One, that knowledge and understanding, but that we're actually intentionally getting our students to reason and communicate and problem solve. And it's not just represent with a tool and represent symbolically with an equation and represent with a graphical picture. It's where in the picture is that number from the equation, and where in the Cuisenaire rod is that number from that picture. So it's making connections between representations so that you can explain your thinking better, that making student thinking visible piece. That's the focus we're on, because we're not well balanced. And if you look at the Growing Success Ministry document, it says that the categories of achievement will be focused upon in a balanced manner. And we're just trying to make sure through the work we're doing, certainly in the literacy numeracy world, that we're balancing those categories of achievement.
I have a secondary question. Thank you very much for that answer. I hope it's right. With regard to EQAO, I'm not sure I'm going to use the right language here, but for schools which are identified as underperforming, that's not the right expression, but you know what I mean, below level,
Right.
for example, what kind of assistance is being provided by the ministry to this board to that end?
Through you, Chair, the renewed math strategy, I do believe our board was allocated just over $1 million to support our intense and increased needs schools. And we have leveraged that through ensuring that every single month in our schools we have a literacy learning team and a mathematics learning team where the administrator works with the learning partners. So in our intense and increased needs schools, that's the work of our learning partners to support the work in those schools. They co-plan, they co-facilitate the learning that's going to happen. They take the work from the RMS or the assessment in math or the MTIP math day or the early learning math day, and they talk about research-based, Joe Bowler and growth mindset, or they talk about what to look for in Alex Lawson and those, learning trajectories and continuums. And the work happens in the school at the learning team table. But it's the ministry funding of the renewed math strategy that allows us to leverage those learning partners targeting those intense and increased needs schools. In the intense needs schools, they're going 2 or 3 days a week, every single week as a learning partner to work with the teachers in their classrooms. And I can tell you that it's all about relationship building, but once those relationships are formed, the doors are opening and the focus and the lens is on the student work and the success criteria. It isn't about you as a teacher, it's about what can the student do against those criteria. And if they're not meeting the criteria, let's talk about a teacher strategy we might try. And frequently the learning partner will model it first, and then they will co-facilitate together in the classroom, and then the teacher will do it independently. And we're now at the stage where some learning partners are no longer going in some classrooms because the teacher now has that confidence in the mathematics and the pedagogy, and they're focusing their attention in other classrooms in that same school.
Okay. Thank you. I have more, but I'll go back.
Thank you. Before I turn it back to Trustee McDonald, is there anyone else that would like to have a question? Trustee Wendy McPherson.
No, I just have the one, and it's with regards to when will we see you come back to show us at the end of 2018 that you have increased the number of students achieving the level 3 and 4?
Through you, Chair. So this report is coming at the end of our second cycle for the school year, maybe a little past the end, beginning of our third cycle. So we'll be completing our third cycle in June. The EQAO test, as we know, takes place in the end of May, beginning of June, and then usually we're receiving that information end of the summer, beginning of September. So I think cyclically we look forward always to bringing back a report from this current school year, but then also our next steps and planning forward into the 2018-2019 school year.
Thank you.
Okay, so when's the report coming?
Pardon me?
In the fall of 2018?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, so in
Fall.
September, October, we will get our EQAO results. Can I add to the question? So through you, Chair, I do want to add, it kind of answers a couple of questions that EQAO drives what we're doing. I strongly believe that the shift that we've now made in Upper Canada about the pre and the post, that we administer an exit ticket and know what our students can do, and then we respond to that tomorrow with an intentional move to move them along the continuum, that cycle, daily, weekly, monthly, they have monitoring templates they bring every month. They have to bring evidence of how the students are learning or not, and they have those discussions. I know EQAO measures provincially how we're doing as a system. We're only in the middle of year 2 of this initiative. For system change, it does take time, but through the SIFs that I've shared with you today and the fact that now 51 of our schools are using that cycle of pre and post, and the others are, beginning to make that change, that if we continue to do that over time, I'm very confident that that will translate to improved EQAO results. Where we're kind of stuck right now is that we can't invite every single teacher to one of those, those learning opportunities. So for the teachers who are involved in RMS or assessment in math and have that deep learning, or they're involved in the learning team, the 5 or 6 at the school, we're transforming those classrooms. But there's 30 teachers at the school and 50 teachers at the school. So we need to start talking about a plan in terms of, if we want improved EQAO results, how are we going to ensure that every teacher in every school is, has the confidence themselves in mathematics, which is a huge issue with many of our teachers. And not only that, has the pedagogy and understands that continuum. If they're thinking additively, how do we get them thinking multiplicatively? If we don't know that as teachers, how are we going to close that achievement gap? So it is the pre and the post cycle that I truly believe will be able to close those gaps so that eventually we'll get to the EQAO results that supports that thinking that our board currently has.
Thank you. Trustee McDonald, back to you.
Thank you. So my question is for Superintendent Barrett, and I'm anticipating you don't have the answer to this, but I want to have a discussion. And the reason why I don't think you have the answer is because you haven't been here long enough, primarily. But my question, if we look at page 4 of the other report.
So can we just, through you, Chair, just confirm which report we're looking at? I have 2 in front of me.
So not the PowerPoint, but the secondary report that was in our agenda. Yeah, that one there, I think.
The BIPSA, the Board Improvement Plan, not the report that you also had
sorry.
attached.
No, the Board Improvement Plan.
Thank you.
So page 4, and I'm just going to look at junior reading, for instance. So 2003-4, we're at 52%, I think it was. We see an increase, we see a dip, and then we see a steady increase up to 2013-14 to 77. If, being in an investment side of things, that's what we want to see for your retirement, right? To grow. And then we see a little dip in 15-16 to 16-17. Do we know, and this will apply to a lot of the other little slides as well, is that do we know what, milestone or what collaborative factor either allowed us to see an increase or allowed us to see a dip in our results? And there's some bigger ones. And I use this one as a simple analysis, but there's some bigger ones. So, and it could be.
So through you, Chair, I will give a context, and then if the detailed elements that I'm unable to fill in, if somebody has some of that, I'm welcoming any input as well. So those years that you referenced, really we were having a very provincial focus in the areas of literacy, similarly to what we would have now in the renewed math strategy. So provincially, we saw a lot of funds being targeted in literacy improvement, particularly around the aspects of balanced literacy. And a lot of our pedagogy and professional development was focused on building that teacher efficacy in the area of quality literacy instruction in our schools. The final year that you referenced with regards to when we start, to not see that, I would say, is when we started to look at other aspects of curricular improvements, right? So when we take our eye off the ball a little bit, then we start to perhaps see improvements in other areas. So our challenge always as a system is to ensure that while we are maintaining focus in an area such as now in mathematics, that we don't lose gains around the knowledge and understanding that we've had previous years in another area, this time literacy. So how do we ensure that our new teachers coming in have as much of the professional learning so that they would be in keeping with what our board goals are with regards, to literacy. And I think we would say that we recognize what we've learned from those years. We have to have kids reading by grade 3. We know that as a system. And I think that we take the funds available to us and try to and I would say even beyond try. Really, we set specific goals to impact those areas. And the learning teams themselves, that structure within our system, really create the conditions for educators to not be learning in isolation. We're always better as a group in terms of our knowledge and our networking. We're going to get those further gains. So setting those structures, I think, will help us to bring, those improvements back, regardless of the fact that we have resources financially allocated towards other subject areas. I don't know if there's anything else, Anne-Marie, that you wanted to add there.
I don't think so.
No, okay, thanks.
Yep. So, and thank you for that. That you went down the path where I hoped you'd go. So from a resource standpoint, the financial standpoint, we see changes in funding from the province, but as the funding changes, then we also see a correlation to results. So I think that's why it's important that when we reach budget discussions, if GSNs have changed, we need to be having the discussion about how the impact, so financial impact, but what's our overall impact for student success. And we need to, it's really hard to put your hand onto those facts at the time, but we see it now, right? If a year after, 2 years after those changes have taken place, we see the results. So it's imperative that if the government doesn't change that funding model, then what do we do, or how can we support it with some of the limited discretionary funding that we may have? So if we go to the math slides, and I'll just use junior math to stay in the same vein. What area? So we started out in 03-04, we've kind of went up, and now we see a decline. So when did we see the increase of focus on math, and when do we see the change in support associated to math?
So through you, Chair, I can speak to the fact that the renewed math strategy itself, the substantial allocation that Principal Corleone referenced, did begin last year. So in our 17-18 school year, then 16-17, sorry, I'm losing my numbers here. Then we know that this is the second year, and we have commitment from the ministry for a third year. So ensuring that we can, you mentioned junior math, really the renewed math strategy is to impact all levels of math, right from kindergarten through grade 12, and it's ensuring that after that influx of funds, as you spoke to, we still continue to maintain the gains, right? And I think, again, we've been very strategic as a system to really be wise about the use of the resources to have the greatest impact, to go deep with the learning so that we are building teacher content and pedagogical knowledge, so that when we step away, it's a bit like scaffolding for our students, right? When we scaffold in learning situations, we're there in support, but we want to be able to step away towards independence. So as a system, we're in this stage, so to speak, of that scaffolded support, and at the end of our 3 years, we'll look at, where do we need to now step away, where we will have success for our teachers in terms of their confidence and their skill level. And we have great teachers in our system who are so eager to learn. We heard the passion here tonight from our principals. One of these days, maybe I'll fill the back corner with all of our learning partners, and you'll feel that energy, and that just extends into our classrooms as well. So I think as a system, we're really committed to preparing our students for a successful life, and we're going to endeavor everything that we can in terms of our wise targeting and setting our teachers and our students up for that success.
Director, do you want to add to that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Just in terms of that correlation between funding and academic achievement, I think what the board would want to be mindful of is if year one last year, year two this year funding, year three, we would be looking at who was in grade 1 and in grade 4 last year, who was in grade 2 and grade 5 this year, who was in grade 3 and grade 6 by the end of June 2019. Because then in the fall of 2019, that's where there's really an important piece here, that after that 3 years of funding, what did we see in terms of the difference that the resources, the time spent on teaching and learning, those intentional instructional moves that we heard about this evening, how did that all, from an accumulative effect, result in that one snapshot? Plus, how did that result in terms of the cumulative effects of a grade 3 report card and a grade 6 report card? So I think that's going to be really important information to be able to bring to the board, because we do see from tonight's presentation some initial and promising signs of movement in grade 3, 6, and 9, and grade 10 as well. On page 4 that we were looking at just a moment ago, I think what's also important for the board to be aware of is that we're looking at 3 different types of standards. We're looking at performance standards, we're looking at content standards, and we're looking at contextual standards. So the content standards, as you heard this evening, is all about the curriculum. That's the driver, that's the basis for whether it's daily classroom instruction, a report card snapshot, or EQAO. The performance standards are also quite universal too. It's level 1, 2, 3, or 4, or no record. And so that would apply to whether we're talking about report cards or EQAO. But it's the contextual standard that's really a key variable here. And the context of which students have been learning and what do they need to improve in their learning is what changes yearly and changes by cohort as well. What we really desire as a contextual standard is independence. We really want our students to be able to show their learning with minimal teacher assistance and by themselves. And that's what the provincial assessment is. It really is a snapshot about students being able to show their learning independently through that grade 3 assessment, grade 6 assessment, 9 or 10. What we also see is that the curriculum grows a focus on a contextual standard of independence, and there's a significant difference what we're asking students to do in the junior division compared to primary division, intermediate compared to junior, and then lastly in the senior division as well. So I do think that, while we have 2 standards that we are constantly engaging, the content standard and the performance standard that's quite fixed, the contextual standard is very fluid. And it helps to explain, I hope, for trustees, for parents, for students themselves, why are there some differences in my learning this year, or in a class's learning, or in a cohort's learning in a given year as well.
Thank you. Come back. You've got another question, I know, Trustee McDonald.
That's fine. No, that's fine. Yeah.
You good there? Trustee McAllister.
Thank you. I really appreciate the work that you are doing and the work that's happening in our schools, and I'm really pleased to hear that the focus is on the schools and on the classrooms and on the work of the students, and it's heartening to hear that it's beginning to pay off. There's no doubt in my mind, and it's pretty obvious as you sit around this table and listen to folks like you, that teaching and learning have changed a great deal, exponentially, as a matter of fact, in the past number of years. My question really is, how is each school helping parents make sense of this?
We're both going to jump forward at the same time through you, Chair. I think we have, an exemplary cadre of administrators in our system who always recognize the component of achieving excellence and building public confidence in our schools. And we heard from one school tonight, right, that really has that true example of collaboration both inside the school for students and then with the community and with the parents. So we have things in relation to specifically, let's pick math, where one of the goals of the renewed math strategy is helping our families understand what is this teaching and learning that's happening in a classroom, and how is it different, and how can I as a parent support my student in the work that they're doing. So we see math nights. We see maker nights. There's all various very creative ways that our principals are engaging our families in helping them understand. We see families invited, into the classroom experience. So I think, and I think that there are, I don't want to land just on one thing, because I think we have many schools in our district, and there's many different intersections in terms of the needs for parents and how parents are sharing that and what parents are saying. But I do believe that our administrators are listening to our families and taking measures to meet those needs. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add there.
Through you, Chair, the only one thing I would like to add is the leveraging of technology. We have the Office 365 platform, and teachers now are collecting evidence of observations, conversations, and products in their OneNotes, as opposed to just a mark in a mark book. And I was speaking to one teacher last week, and she has invited her parents into their children's individual section of that OneNote. And so when the teacher is providing descriptive feedback against criteria on a video of two students having a conversation about math, the parent has access to that. So we're trying to move away from, reporting periods. We're trying to make it fluid so that parents forever have exposure to the work that's happening in the classroom. So that technology piece really can assist us in terms of making sure and enhancing public confidence, but also helping parents to understand how we want our students to be thinkers and how we're pushing them against criteria, as opposed to just, well done, good job, one comment in a report card. They can see it live as the student is learning. So that's the work we're trying to do, is to get the teachers to use that technology to bring the parent into the classroom, not just on a parent night, but daily in their child's learning journey.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think great discussion. Let's have just a couple more, if you don't mind. Tristan McDonald, go with you first.
So I wanted to pick up on that point, the technology piece. So when you said the video, so they're seeing their own child, or they're seeing just the lesson, or?
Through you, Chair, what capacity we've been doing with our teachers around assessment through Growing Success is that we need to collect evidence of not only the product, the test, for example, or a quiz, but the conversations that take place in the classroom and the observations the teachers are making. So the video would be, for example, Anne-Marie and I with Cuisenaire rods showing what 28 looks like on a number line, but with Cuisenaire rods, and how that's 6 more than 22 with Cuisenaire rods. So that clip would get taken by the teacher, and with older students, they're actually taking their own video clips, and through the tools that we have, they can actually, many teachers are color coding the success criteria, so they might be circling this in blue and saying that's evidence of the blue criterion up there. We want them to be independent assessors of their own work, so that's the clip that would be in the OneNote that the parent would see. And it might be an anecdotal comment from a teacher saying, I see evidence of partial variation, let's say, and if with a grade 9 students, show me where direct variation is in your problem. And so the student would then have to go back and provide evidence of that. And so the parents would see that interaction between the teacher, and for some teachers, the parents are actually also making comments, because at home they're, we noticed this, or, on measurement or whatever.
So I think that's where I wanted to ask, my question was around that, because we all have heard of Khan Academy, and we see the ability for those things. And I think the frustration for many parents is that I hear it in the community, and we all hear it, is that this is not how they learned math. This is not what they're used to. So they're at home, they're trying to help their child, but the child is getting frustrated because that's not what my teacher said. So we create that environment that's not really good for the family. But so I think it's important for to have that. So my original question was, have we ever thought about having just video lessons available, so that anybody in our Upper Canada board could tap into the YouTube channel and see it, and it's there, right? It's kind of that enhanced flipping the classroom focus. And I think that's something that we can do to help parents at home on a regular basis, and just feel a little bit more comfortable, right? They don't know where to turn to find some of that stuff. So
So through you, Chair, the EduGains website that the ministry puts together has a lot, there's an entire section devoted to the parents in terms of how we're trying to build capacity with the students. I hesitate to make a video of instruction because that's not what our classrooms look like anymore. It isn't the teacher saying, this is how you solve a system of equations and, you know, you do substitution this way. It's about creating conditions where kids are hungry for the answer to a problem. So I'll give a quick example of grade 7 and 8 class. We're doing data management, and they were going to talk about salaries that, you know, execs make and doctors make. And I said, they were having a conversation, and the conversation, well, what are kids interested in now? Well, they were bottle flipping, you know, that land on and how many times. And so we had a little competition, and how many times can you flip it? And then they had to actually analyze and create the mean, median, and mode, and who should go on to the regionals based on their performance. What measure are you using in order to decide who's going on? So it's very difficult to videotape a lesson when it really, through inquiry, the learning happens. And, you know, you attach that to the curriculum and said, oh, well, why did you use the mean versus the median in order to make your decision? And how are they different and how are they same? So it really is the learning in the classroom where the curriculum emerges. So that's not so easy to capture in a 10-minute video that a parent can watch and then know what to teach their child. I think it's much more about bringing the parent into that classroom. We were interviewing a teacher last week, and she said, I had 4 parent nights this year myself with my grade 4 parents, where they can come and touch those tools and have those experiences, and then I provide them with strategies they can use at home, those counting or multiplication strategies. I mentioned partial products earlier. I'm sure there are many of you, and I was the same, that didn't know what that was, but when someone pointed it out to me as a strategy for multiplying, it was like, oh my goodness, I can do these numbers in my head now so quickly now that I know that strategy. So it's really about teaching the parents those specific intentional strategies and then having them practice those in the home.
Thank you. Trustee Carter, I'll let you have the final question.
Oh,
comment.
Well, it's kind of a comment because the director spoke to it briefly in his explanation, but I'm wondering, collaboration seems to be the big word that we hear. The students collaborate to come to an answer. But when they get to EQAO, collaboration doesn't happen. They're on their own, as you pointed out. You probably are working towards that with each of these students, and maybe it's not the place to answer it tonight, but I just want to know that you're doing something about that.
Yeah. Through you, Chair, there's 2 types of understanding. There's procedural understanding and there's conceptual understanding. Procedural understanding is, here's the formula, this is what I need to do, here are the numbers, let's plug them in, let's get an answer, but I have no idea what the circumference of the circle is, and I have no understanding about why that is the formula. Conceptual understanding is, you know, starting with the visualization, using the tools, and then saying, oh my goodness, I see the relationship between this and this, and then actually understanding what the question is answering or asking us to do and the answer we need to get to. And we only do that through that collaboration piece. But what emerges at the end is that students understand. They know what the question is asking them, they can make meaning of that question, and they have a toolbox of strategies they can use independently in order to demonstrate that learning. That's the end game. We want that independence. And, you know, if we look at the assessment cycle and that descriptive feedback, we want the students, and in the RMS, we videotape the students and show that every RMS, and they tell us how best they learn. And we videotape in a grade 3 classroom at Central Public School, and the student was doing, two girls, they were talking, they were doing some work, and then they were looking at the success criteria. Oh, that's missing. And off they were going back on their own without the teacher as grade 3 students against those success criteria. That's the independence we're going to come to. We just need it to happen in every single classroom. And that's the work now, is the challenge is how do we spread that to every classroom.
Thank you.
Shelley, your energy's tired me.
Sorry.
No, I mean that as a compliment. Anne-Marie, Shelley, and Leslie, thank you so much for the presentation. Superintendent Barrett, there's no doubt in my mind why you are proud of your team. Mm-hmm. None of us can wait, although we have to see the end of year 3 and how all this is going to unfold. I know there's another team that works with you people, And I know how powerful they are, and so this has been a really good discussion. I'm really pleased with everything that was brought forward. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Chair McMillan.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next student trustee report. So I'm going to turn this over to our student trustee, Marshall Wilson.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So I'll try and keep my report somewhat short. The first topic is Student Senate. We have our elections coming up, and as many of you may have seen, we're switching up our election process this year, so we're opening up to the entire school board instead of just the Student Senate. I'm pleased with this new election process, and I think it's the right direction for Student Senate to be heading. It's innovative, and it's a change, and I'm excited to see what it will lead to. As well, I've been working with a small team of senators for the past few months to create a handbook for future senators. This handbook will contain useful information about the role of student senators, about the Senate itself, and answer questions that a lot of senators have coming into it or looking at their position. And it's just meant to make the position easier for the students and answer some unanswered questions that still stand. As well, we've all received our sweatshirts for Senate, and everyone's very pleased with them, so that was a good place to put some board money. Also, our December Senate meeting was our last Student Senate meeting due to inclement weather in February. During that meeting, I continued to engage with the Senate on the subcommittee topics, so that directly relates to the director and the board's work plans. I was really pleased with the conversations, and I've been very pleased with the subcommittee model of Senate. It's the first year that we've tried something like this, and I hope that the Senate will continue to improve upon this model. I think it's very effective for completing tasks and just sort of executing what the Senate's meant to do. Next is the Ontario Student Trustee Association. In February, I attended the Board Council Conference in Ottawa. It was a very educational experience, and it was an amazing opportunity as always. We had a handful of keynote speakers which came and spoke, and they were amazing. And then the last point is just a small bit about the pilot project the board has launched about guidance counselors. And it's already started to affect my school. My guidance counselor came up to me and her had a long talk about how it's been affecting our school. And she just pointed out some of the areas that we've already started to see improvement in. We've been able to restore many of guidance's best practices, as she put it. So the guidance counselors, the two of them now, are able to meet with a lot of parents like they used to a few years back, but due to staffing issues and such, it's been reduced. But now they get to meet with grade 10 primarily students and parents to sort of plan their educational future, as well as they get to attend more workshops, and they get more time to plan and also more time to support the students that need it. And that's my student trustee report.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? All right, good stuff. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next item. This is a review of policy 430. Just as a reminder to trustees, this came to the board on February the 14th. We had a kind of a rich discussion on that, but we weren't able to move forward with a motion to get it passed. We sent it back for the director to have another look, and I know the director has reviewed that meeting and listened to the conversation many times to try to get a handle on where to move next. So the director is bringing back again the policy 430 for us to have a review. So what I'd like to do is
role, and the role is to action and implement policies and procedures of the board. So in some ways it might be redundant. In other ways, the board may want to consider that statement as an accountability statement or a reinforcement of policy 1002. It was placed in there because part of that is to clarify who carries out the direction and the expectation of the board. But I'll leave it to you, Mr. Chair, to see if there's any other comments in terms of that particular statement.
Well, we're on that statement. Are there any concerns? Mr. McDonald?
Yeah, to the director's point, and I think it clearly states in 102 that it's your responsibility as a director, and it clearly states in other policies about safe school. It talks about student discipline in policy 126. Talks about code of conduct in policy 124. We have an Upper Canada District School Board code of conduct. I just think it's repetitive and redundant. If we continue to have repetitive information from one policy in another policy, if I'm sitting here trying to read it, I don't know which to look for or to look
I have a different perspective on that, in that I'm rather pleased to see it, to tell you the truth, because then it provides me as a trustee the opportunity to ask the director at some point, whether it be in the quarterly reports, whatever, what steps did you take to actively contribute this year? And I'm thinking perhaps of, say, the initiatives of the Living Well Committee or whatever.
Okay.
So if I can,
So Trustee Wendy McPherson, I'll go back to you.
oh, you're back to me? Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's fine. I mean, that explanation is fine enough, and I appreciate that.
Just before,
But I wanted to,
if you've got something just different than that, Director, are you going to comment just on that particular, because I don't want to lose
Okay, yes,
the conversation, but I'm coming right back to you.
That's correct, Mr. Chair, through you.
No.
You may note that at the very end of the policy, there's a statement there that was part of the previous policy orientation that says annual review, which this discussion is, and following a report by the director to the board and community on safe schools. So what Trustee McAllister mentioned a moment ago would be part of that kind of report back annually to the board.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Trustee Wendy McPherson, but I didn't want to lose track of where we were. Okay, so next question.
okay, so then the next bulleted thing with the creating and promoting a code of conduct outlining expectations for the, my only issue with this here is that you're saying creating. I would prefer you be updating and promoting our code of conduct than creating new ones. Do you know what I'm saying? And the other was support for specific student-based events. Support for specific student-based events. Should that not just say support for student-based events? Or, because I don't quite understand for the Pacific. What is that? I mean, I'm reading that and I'm not understanding. Are we looking at some specific students that are blind and we would support that effect? Or like, what are you saying when you mean that?
Okay, Director, explain that term,
Mr.
specific
Chair,
students.
yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. That was to align with Bill 13 that's now incorporated in the Education Act that speaks to a focus that the province and certainly our board has had on all means all, and particularly any type of activity that is related to equity, inclusivity, respect and caring school environments. The board has a reasonable expectation and is required by the Act to provide support and guidance and direction to schools that are interested in creating those clubs or events. And the reason specific is there as a qualifier is that some student-based events may not actually contribute to a positive and inclusive school climate. We know that there are examples in other school districts about hazing and about induction of new students to schools. Much of that has gone and is not really part of a regular school environment. When I think about our link crews, for example, link crews in our secondary schools are highly supportive, very welcoming about new students coming on board. That's not always the case in some settings, and we would want to make sure that the policy specified that there are certain events that contributes to creating safe schools. There's other events and maybe activities that may not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Trustee McAllister.
I note that you have removed the Student Mental Health Advisory Circle of Trustees, students, et cetera, et cetera. Just a question, Director. That doesn't mean that you cannot focus. You cannot create a focus group, for example, at any time to ascertain perhaps the value or the function or the efficiency of of the policy, is it?
Mr. Chair, through you, that's correct. The updating of the policy reflects how we now solicit more universally student input about safe, caring, and respectful school environments. So the Tell Them For Me process that we have been engaged in over the last 2 years have meant that we are using student-based groups to share the findings of those surveys and asking for advice about how to proceed. So I do think that we've moved a lot further in terms of student voice, and I do think clearly that the district has invested in that. It's not through that particular venue, and as a matter of fact, we as a district don't have that venue any longer. We actually have a Living Well committee that has become an amalgamation of student, staff, and community voice. So I think what we're endeavoring to do here is to upgrade the board's policy to reflect what our current reality is, and it certainly is not restrictive, and I appreciate the question.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald?
Thank you. So, Director, you said you reviewed the video and went through the policy and the comments that we had. I can vividly recall my comments on this policy, and at the time it was too long. We were talking about a safe schools policy. I remember saying that the first paragraph is basically all we needed. The rest of the stuff is really around procedure. The rest of the stuff is repeated in other policies. So I guess I might have been on mute that particular time whenever the video was being reviewed. But my frustration then is that we still have a policy before us that really doesn't look any different than what we had last time, only with a few substitutions of words. We still have overlap of policies. We still have a policy that directs you to take necessary steps to provide for the safety and well-being of students while participating in school programs and being transported to or from school. So I'm left bewildered as to why we want to continue to have overlapping policies that really don't create an environment for us to be able to deal with things very easily. If it's a safe schools policy, then let's deal with safe schools. If it's code of conduct, we have a code of conduct policy. If that needs revision, then we review that. But you've tried to capture every other policy potentially into safe schools just by the wording that you have. So I won't be supporting this, and I think it needs to be reviewed again.
I think I just want to make a reminder, and with all due respect, that every trustee is only one voice at this table. And you may be bewildered, but that is simply yours. When you review a tape, you're looking at all the trustees. It's all trustees.
Sure, I'll review the tape though, Chair. Thank you very much.
Regardless, I'm just saying your voice is one voice. That's all I'm saying.
Clearly, thank you.
Okay, Director.
Mr. Chair, through you, I appreciate the comment. We recognize that the board's policy stance or position is about being clear and brief. I did want to make sure that I was reflecting the variety of feedback that was provided that evening. There was, I think certainly I could say from the feedback in February, there was a range of brief, make changes if necessary, but don't reduce the policy from its existing circumstance. And then there was always the need to ensure that we were focusing on safe schools and not allied concerns or matters. So again, I appreciate the comments and welcome the advice of the board about this current draft and to respect how you wish us to proceed.
This is the second attempt. I mean, we have two options. One, we can go forward with a vote to see if the trustees agree with the changes. If we don't, then it just reverts back to the original policy. Trustee Cartner.
Can we call the question?
Certainly.
As a seconder, I'm allowed to do that?
Okay, set the vote. Are the votes appearing?
Go back to the beginning.
Here it is.
Okay, Trustee Jacobs?
Are you done?
Doesn't matter. Okay, that carries. Trustee Jacob wouldn't matter, it still carries. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Director. Okay, moving on, Director, comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. As the members of the Board of Trustees know in their acronym of CREW, C is for collaboration, and I wish to draw to your attention that the Board has its own initiatives committee. That is a response to Policy and Program Memoranda 159, which is about collaborative professionalism that the Ministry of Education has issued. Last year, the senior staff engaged our labor executives as required in the Policy and Program Memoranda, and there was a number of very positive outcomes that came out of that in terms of reference about our meeting 3 times a year to talk about initiatives that are coming from our respective tables, to understand how we can collaborate and pool resources in order to build the capacities that we want and things that we think matters to children and their learning. And today, 8 members of the senior staff and 6 members of the labor group executives joined together in Ottawa at a session, a regional session, and I'm pleased to share with you that among the various 9 different school boards who were there, we are certainly ahead of where we should be in this kind of dialogue. It's a really positive and uplifting feeling because we know that you believe that when we work together, greater end results happen for students in schools. I also think that it shows our willingness to work with a variety of stakeholders that have a direct interest in education and the educational outcomes. As well, I want to thank the members of the Ontario Principals Council, that's are the affiliate for Upper Canada District School Board, who invited me to attend their executive council session last month. We do really have a strong rapport, and you heard this morning, or this evening, I should say, at our meeting that we have an extremely high view about our principals in our system. We have, as we heard earlier, an exceptional cadre of people who are leading both as learners and doing operational management at the site level. And I do accredit and attribute that to a strong executive around the Ontario Principal Council table as well. That's very aligned with what the board stands for, and certainly what the senior staff is trying to implement in our schools. So I'm thankful for their collaboration and their support as well. So for the members of the board, I'd like you to know that we understand that collaboration happens at many levels, internally and externally to the board, and I want to provide you with 2 examples of where that's happening internally with different groups that are aligned with their work and their vision in terms of serving students.
Thank you, Director. I'm sorry, I don't have any remarks tonight. It's unusual, but I don't. Okay, saying that, I need a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board move into Committee of the Whole. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Trustee Wendy McPherson and Trustee Richards, thank you very much. I'll ask you to cast your votes for that, please. Or just a show of hands will work. Thank you very much. I also need a motion that the Committee of the Whole move into private session April 11, 2018. Again, a mover and a seconder. Trustee McAllister. Trustee Cram, thank you. Again, show of hands, or you can cast your votes. Thank you very much.
I had 5 minutes. I had 5 minutes. I had 5 minutes. I had 5 minutes.